Namaste. And take a moment to allow your awareness to scan the space. And just notice your externally focused awareness in this moment. Take in all of the sense information that is present to you. Scan each one of the senses. Notice the physical body and help it to find a state of balance and a state of solidity. Let the eyes settle. And with the eyes settled, let them soften. Become aware of your peripheral vision. And as the eyes soften, notice the breath. And when you're ready, go ahead and close the eyes, turn the gaze inside. And from inside the body now, relax the forehead. And now, relax the forehead some more. Locate the point in the center of the head. And relax the point of consciousness in the center of the head. Locate the center of the throat. And relax the throat center of consciousness. Meet yourself in the center of the chest. And relax the heart center of consciousness. the navel. And relax the navel center point of consciousness. The conscious awareness in the abdomen relaxes. Meet yourself at the base of the body, the place that grounds you to the earth, and relax the root center of consciousness. Feel the whole body sit heavy. The earth absorbing all of the holding, all of the tension. Let it go. Let go. And with each exhaled breath, let go even more. Surrender into the space that the body is occupying. And now we'll move through the rotation of consciousness. As I list a body part, repeat that body part in your mind with conscious awareness sent to that spot in the body. Bring all of your attention to your right hand. Right hand thumb, first finger, second finger, third finger, fourth finger, palm of the hand, back of the hand, center point of the wrist, forearm, center of the elbow, armpit, right side body, hip, thigh, right knee, shin, center point of the right ankle, top of the foot, sole of the foot, first toe, second toe, third toe, fourth toe, fifth toe, left hand thumb, first finger, second finger, third finger, fourth finger, palm of the hand, back of the hand, center point of the wrist, forearm, center of the elbow, armpit, left side body, hip, thigh, center of the left knee, shin, center point of the ankle, top of the foot, sole of the foot, first toe, second toe, third toe, fourth toe, fifth toe, the back of both heels together, calves, buttocks, low back, upper back, back of the head, crown of the head, forehead, tip of the nose, right nostril, left nostril, right cheek, left cheek, top lip, bottom lip, tip of the tongue, center of the tongue, root of the tongue, chin, right side of the chest, left side of the chest, abdomen, right leg from the hip socket all the way down to the toes, the whole right leg. Left leg from the hip socket to the tips of the toes, the whole left leg. Right arm from the shoulder joint to the tips of the fingers. Left arm from the shoulder joint to the tips of the fingers. Whole right side of the body. Whole left side of the body. Front side of the body. Back side of the body. the whole body together. The whole body. The whole body. Stay in whole body awareness now. Now feel the seat beneath you. Feel all points of contact with the earth. Slowly begin to externalize your awareness, listening to the sounds around you. Take a deep breath in. Notice the smells. And slowly, when you're ready, gently blink open the eyes. Namaste. All right, here we are. Let's take a look at the anatomy of the brain. So, what is the function of the human brain? So, the brain is the unifying organ that brings our physical experience from the body together with our non-physical experience, which is our thoughts and emotions. So essentially, the brain processes the sense information that we're receiving from external stimuli and then produces the thoughts and emotions and feelings that we have about these external experiences, or in some cases, reactions or responses for survival, etc. And so when we're practicing Yoga Nidra, the reason we're interested in this is because the regions of the brain are stimulated and relaxed at the same time so that we move through experience in a non-reactive state. So in Yoga Nidra, remember, we're slowing down the brain waves. We're moving into a slower frequency brain state, and then moving through experiences from a place where there's no reaction. There's none of this knee-jerk reaction, because we can move out of the part of the brain that is constantly analyzing and reacting on subconscious programming. So what we're doing then is we're training our nervous system to be less reactive and more responsive. Okay, training our nervous system to be able to take a step back and pause when an external stimuli comes in order to respond rather than react. The practice of Yoga Nidra will inspire this awakening of otherwise dormant neural pathways. So the neural pathways are those connections between neurons, and these otherwise dormant pathways can be awakened through this practice. It also induces a whole brain coherence. So when the brain is in incoherent state, different parts of the brain are firing at different times and there's no synchronization to it. And maybe you've experienced this when the overly analytical mind is sort of chattering away. Sometimes it feels like there's no rhyme or reason, there's no coherence. And so the practice of Yoga Nidra will bring more coherence to the brain. And that coherence then will translate to um, easier balance of homeostasis within the body. And of course, harmonizing of the 5 koshas, which we'll go over in the next class. So let's take a look at what our brain looks like. So this is a slide that I took from Dr. Joe Dispenza's Rewired. This is linked as an optional lecture, additional supplemental lecture that you're welcome to go through. And I highly recommend that you do watch Dr. Joe Dispenza because he is very educated in this neural anatomy and what it means for us in as far as awakening that consciousness within the unconscious and the subconscious mind and merging into that unified field of awareness, or some call it the quantum field. I like to call it the cosmic soup of amazingness. It goes by many different names. So here you see a very basic diagram of the brain, and 4 of the major sections that we'll cover. And of course, there's so much more complexity to this. And this lecture, we will be oversimplifying each of these sections just so that you can have a general idea of how we are moving through the brainscape. So if the brain had a landscape, and Yoga Nidra, you can see here the movement of consciousness is flowing through in this way. So here you see at the top the neocortex. Okay, we're going to break this down into these 4 sections. We'll talk about the neocortex and generally what occurs there, or what the neocortex, the different lobes within the neocortex are controlling. We'll talk about the limbic brain, sometimes called the emotional brain. This is the place where a lot of our hormones are regulated, and the brainstem and the cerebellum. So here's just a nice sort of overview of the shape of the brain, and we'll begin with the neocortex because this really is the sort of analytical part of our brain. And this is the part of the brain that in the practice of Yoga Nidra and the practice of meditation and even just relaxation for that matter, we have to calm this analytical mind, this rational thinking brain, okay? And this part of the brain is unique in humans, okay? It's the seat of our conscious mind, and it's the newest part of the brain, the place where we have logical and abstract thought. It controls our use of language, imagination, and ideas, as well as knowledge and philosophy. Okay, so here within the neocortex, this is the area of sort of executive function, sort of like the CEO of the brain, or you can think of it as like a symphony leader. And it's the place in the brain that decides on the free will, on learning, intention, setting an intention, the place of invention, and where we place our attention and focus. That's where we speculate and make decisions and exhibit some kind of behavioral control. So if we break down the neocortex, you can see here that we have the frontal lobe there in blue, the parietal lobe there in orange, the temporal lobe in green, and the occipital lobe there in pink. And underneath you can see the brain stem and the cerebellum. And inside, sort of behind that temporal lobe in the very center of the brain, is where we would see that limbic brain. Okay, so the neocortex we can break down by lobe and what functions happen at each location. So in the frontal lobe, here we have our ability to hold attention. And so you can see in humans, this frontal lobe is quite large. Okay, this is, when we're practicing Yoga Nidra, there's going to still be some activity in the frontal lobe because this is where we have to maintain awareness of cueing. Okay. And this is where we remain conscious of the parts that we can't see, like within the brain stem and the cerebellum, where our unconscious and our subconscious belief patterns are held. Okay. Okay. So in then the parietal lobe here, the one sort of just behind there in orange, this is our sense of boundary in space. So our spatial awareness, you could say. In waking state, the parietal lobe, of course, is engaged. That way we don't run around running into walls and tripping over tables and things like that. This is the part of the brain that allows for social engagement. And in subtler states of yoga, when you want to have a conscious connection with the unified field, the parietal lobe will be a little bit less active so that the practitioner doesn't stay confined in this form. Okay, and because in this form, the I maker, the ahamkara, or the ego, is very loud, very noisy, right? And so when one goes into subtler states, then this sense of confined space and boundary becomes lessened. Okay. And as such, the inner and outer space becomes less and less defined, right? So there's the boundaries begin to be blurred between the inner space and the outer space. Okay. Yeah. The occipital lobe then, so this is where you'll have this visual processing. Okay, so it's taking the visual information from the eyes, and in the dream space, it projects holograms and provides visualizations in these sort of deeper dream states and deeper states of yoga. So when we're practicing Yoga Nidra, we're lighting up these different parts of the brain sequentially and moving essentially from the forebrain, where the conscious mind is, to the hindbrain, where the subconscious is. And we're creating this bridge that connects the two and brings coherence to all of the regions of the brain to inspire that sort of whole brain coherence, right? And so this visual processing, of course, comes in when we're practicing Yoga Nidra, and the rapid visualizations come to mind. Okay, then we have the temporal lobe, and this is the part of the brain that is processing sounds and smells. It contributes to learning and the interpretation of language, facilitates storage of long-term emotional memories, and helps us to associate and relate new experiences to past experiences. It's responsible for conceptual thinking, and it's the temporal lobe that gives us the ability to choose which thoughts we want to express and which ones we'd like to keep to ourselves. So, this is sort of our place of communication. It's also been correlated with things like deja vu, and experiences within the emotional body and some spiritual insights. Okay, so here is the neocortex then. Um, Remember, this is where our analytical mind is, and we're traveling through this sort of landscape of the brain to build a connection between our conscious awareness, our conscious um, input and insights, and build that connection into the subconscious, right? So in the frontal lobe, the frontal lobe is where we gather our sense information. So whatever we take in through the senses, whatever emotions, memories, and visions that make those experiences real and make those experiences meaningful, is processed here in the frontal lobe, right? This is where we initiate physical movement. And so it makes sense then that we start in the frontal lobe as we begin the process of pratyahara, of closing off our senses, and we start to kind of work our way through, right? So from the frontal lobe through, so in the parietal lobe, remember this is our sort of our spatial awareness. It's where we interpret, changes in pressure, changes in temperature, those feelings that are associated with pleasure and pain. So you may relate that to the opposite sensations of yoga nidra practice, where we practice, heaviness and lightness, or pain and pleasure. Okay, so begin with the senses and move to our spatial awareness. Also, of course, the rotation of consciousness is also lighting up this part of the brain and bringing our awareness to the space that each body part occupies. Okay. And then, continuing to travel through, then, we have this visual information in the occipital lobe with the rapid visualizations, and of course the temporal lobe, which is processing the sounds and the language. The one external key that we stay aware of would be the teacher's voice in the yoga nidra practice. Okay, so the neocortex is the most evolved part of the brain. It came into existence about 3 million years ago. It's found in humans and primates and dolphins. And again, this is the seat of our conscious awareness, of our free will and voluntary behavior. Okay, moving into the limbic brain. Okay, so the limbic system, you'll see here, it's sort of that center, Eye of Horus kind of looking space in the image there. And so this is our emotional, our feeling brain. This is the mammalian brain, okay, the place where we can experience empathy and parental care. This is where dreams come from, control of habits, memories, and interaction with others. Okay, so the limbic system, the limbic brain, this is where our autonomic nervous system is, and it's our subconscious or automatic body processes that are controlled here. So things like regulating our blood sugar levels, respiration, temperature, heart rate, the things that our body so intelligently does without our conscious awareness. So those subconscious physiological processes are taken care of within the limbic system due to the release and regulation of various hormones to bring the body into homeostasis. Okay, so the limbic brain is manufacturing the chemicals so that the body understands what the mind understands. Okay, so if we break down the limbic brain, you can take a look at this diagram here, and these are the organs associated with the limbic brain. Okay, we have the thalamus, which is the sensory gateway, the hypothalamus, which regulates homeostasis, the pituitary gland, which activates the endocrine system, and the pineal gland, which regulates the rhythm, the hippocampus, responsible for our memory, the amygdala, which is responsible for emotion, and the basal ganglia for movement and reward. Okay, so the limbic brain evolved between 300 and 150 million years ago, and continued to increase its complexity. And it's the place right between the brain stem, which is the unconscious mind, and the neocortex, which is the conscious mind. Okay, and as I mentioned, it's controlling those physiological processes that we don't have to think about, and like temperature of the body, digestion, our hormone levels. When we're drifting off to sleep and we close our eyes to the external world. So it's in the pineal gland that when the eyes close and the light is turned off from the externally focused day, and we transition into night and close our eyes, or when we do it consciously in meditation, close our eyes to darken our visual perception. It's the pineal gland that releases the melatonin to help us rest, to induce relaxation and rest. And when the eyes open in the morning and light comes back in, then it's the pineal gland that's regulating the release of serotonin to begin our day. And so if we can begin to become aware of these times when we're drifting off to sleep and when we're first waking up in the morning, it's a really key time for meditation and for connection into this subconscious realm to connect us into the unified field. Okay, next we'll look at the reptilian brain. Okay, so this is our instinctual brain. It's the place of survival, so fight, flight, or food, alarm, danger, fear, pleasure, and anxiety. So this is the sort of the oldest, evolutionarily speaking, the oldest section of our brain, and we'll take a look at each little part of it. So the cerebellum, this is the seat of our subconscious awareness, and it's often called the little brain because it has these densely packed and connected nerve cells. Okay, as the subconscious, of course, it is the storehouse of all of our memories. It's in charge of coordination, proprioception, fine and gross motor movements. So in the cerebellum, I mentioned it's your storehouse of memory. So our implicit memories, things that we no longer have to think about. It's like when you learn, for example, how to ride a bike. Once this action is memorized by the cerebellum, it becomes an automatic function and needs very little conscious thought to continue performing it. Like riding a bike or using the restroom or brushing your teeth, things that just sort of become automatic. Okay. In this storehouse of memories, it's kind of like a personal storyline from the person's lifetime. And it's their stored experiences from the moment of being in the womb until this point in time. All of the past experiences that have led to the mental programs or the mental tapes that we have running beneath the surface, so beneath the conscious awareness. All of that is stored in the cerebellum, the subconscious mind. And it connects, karmically speaking, through threads of lifetimes on a personal soul's journey. And according to Indian philosophy, the soul, when choosing this next lifetime, when coming into a state of rebirth, will choose experiences to help grow the consciousness of the soul, based on this storehouse of memory, this storehouse of experiences, that will further the evolution of that individual soul. Okay, so these are our hardwired attitudes, emotional reactions, repetitive actions like habits and patterns, the conditioned behaviors, and our core belief system, all here in the cerebellum. Okay, then the brain stem is that little part down at the bottom, and this is the unconscious part of our brain. It was the first part of the brain to evolve over 500 million years ago, and it's in control of our basic life functions. Okay, it's our sort of compulsive behavior. Okay, this one is our automatic processes, things like sleep cycles, awareness, arousal. It acts sort of as a relay system for the data transmitted between the brain and the body. It's very rigid and very compulsive. Okay, and when you can consciously tap into the unconscious, you're going to go into the cosmic realm. So the deeper you go in the levels of consciousness, the deeper you're essentially going within the brain. And according to Carl Jung, psychologist, he says that this in the brain stem is where the collective unconscious is seen. And so, there's this idea of Carl Jung of these archetypes. And these, there's the shadow archetype, and there's all of these different sort of expressions of the self within the brain, and the collective unconscious patterning and programming, and that is where he says is held in the brainstem. Okay, it's the part of the mind that we all share as a human race. The collective archetypes, the collective memories of generations upon generations. It's the sort of the shared data bank of the human race. And this is where Vijnanamaya, or the wisdom body, Vijnanamaya Kosha and Anandamaya Kosha, can be accessed. And so when one sort of moves through this landscape of the brain from the conscious mind to the subconscious and eventually to the unconscious mind, if you look at the way people describe this sort of experience, is it's entering into this expansive state, and that's why I call it the cosmic soup of amazingness, because as you sink deeper and deeper into the different parts of the brain and through the different levels of consciousness, and of course through the koshas, right? Because we're beginning with the gross, externally focused awareness and slowly making our way into this unbounded creative force. There's just this huge expansion and ability to access the wisdom across time. And of course, that is where the wisdom of the Vedas and the Upanishads come from, because these ancient rishis, these ancient sages, would sit in the forest and practice this process of going through the different levels of consciousness down into that stored, just human memory bank, and not only human, but connected into that pure consciousness, that Brahman. And so they would practice going through these different stages and experiencing this unbounded awareness. And then when they would come back to an externally focused mind, that's when they would verbally teach these important wisdom teachings to their students. And eventually, they were written down into the Vedas. And so knowing that, then we know that we all have access to that information. And that's why the most important guru is yourself. Sitting in silence and noticing where the mind is and where the activity is, and taking the reins, as the metaphor goes in the Bhagavad Gita, taking the reins over the senses and using the mind to bring yourself into this state. And the more you practice, of course, the better you get at it. So the easier and easier it gets in order to connect to that collective unconscious. Okay, so how does this connect with Yoga Nidra? Well, I mentioned that we're going through these different stages, these different levels of consciousness. We're traveling through the landscape of the brain. We're traveling through the koshas, right? And so here's some more very specific examples of how this connects to the brain pattern. So this is the homunculus figure. It's representing the sensory motor cortex, which you can see is that line across the brain there. And so if you were to take a section of the brain just like that, sort of like a slice, and pull it open, scientists were able to connect each section of this sensory motor cortex to different parts of the body. So it says here, it's a neuronal abstraction of the physical body. So these body parts around the edge here are showing you which parts of the sensory motor cortex are related to different parts of the body. And so it's showing the size of each body part based on the amount of brain tissue that's connected to that part. And so, of course, you can see in the little homunculus man there that the areas that have the most attention as far as the most amount of brain tissue, you can easily see the hands, the fingers, the tongue, the lips take up a lot of brain space. And so in rotation of consciousness, in Yoga Nidra, we pay particular attention to those places. And with the tongue, you can even identify very specific parts of the tongue when you're doing the rotation of consciousness. So this brain-body connection is undeniable in today's science. And Yoga Nidra is stimulating the awareness of the body in order to stimulate the brain. So this is the opposite of neurosurgery. In neurosurgery, they would stimulate part of the brain to stimulate part of the body. And also with Yoga Nidra, it's this progressive movement through the sensory motor cortex that causes the body to relax and clears the neuronal pathways to the brain. So here's the diagram of the simplified brain again. And so in Yoga Nidra, I mentioned that we systematically stimulate various areas within the brain. So we calm the body, the somatic system, by using rotation of consciousness. And then in the next stage, which is the opposite sensations, so when you're saying, feel heavy, feel lightness, feel pain, feel pleasure, this part of the practice is bringing a homeostasis to the sense receptors. So you have these temperature and pressure nerve endings in your body, and by activating these opposite sensations, then you're bringing a sense of homeostasis to those sense receptors and allowing them to do their job more efficiently to balance the body. Okay. Also, with these opposite sensations, it allows the practitioner to relive past experiences, for example, pleasure and pain, but from a very non-reactive space. So remember, we're turning off the analytical mind and coming into the subconscious mind and creating a safe space within that so that we can experience these things without reacting. And as such, we are clearing any trauma. And then finally, with these challenging emotions, we're eliciting relaxation and teaching the brain the witness consciousness. So how to take a step back and observe what's happening without experiencing these really challenging emotions. So when you're taking a student through these opposite sensations, you can bring up really challenging emotions and allow them to feel both extremes and then come to a balanced state by experiencing them both at the same time. Okay. So Dr. Joe Dispenza says, as you begin to slow the brain activity and you're no longer analyzing, now you get out of the neocortex and energy begins to flow directly into the limbic brain. That's what this diagram is showing here. And the limbic brain is the seat of the autonomic nervous system, which controls and regulates homeostasis. Now you're in the operating system where you can actually program your autonomic nervous system and change its hormones and body functions. You become conscious in the subconscious mind and you merge with your autonomic nervous system and you get beyond the self. This is then when you can experience order and balance, coherence within the brain, order and cadence and rhythm. And you can take the attention away from the material world, right? So this is the pratyahara, the withdrawing the senses. And you take attention from something to no thing, from somewhere to nowhere, from some time to no time. So essentially you become timeless, detached from the sense of I, and unaware of the boundary and the limitations of space. So you disconnect from the three-dimensional reality and you enter the wonderful present moment, which is the perfect place to create from the unknown. So when you stop giving attention to the material world, you get beyond the body and mind, and you are only pure consciousness, disassociated from everything material, and that is when you enter the unified field. So just to summarize, when the neocortex, when the analytical mind is quiet, then the consciousness flows directly into the subconscious part of the brain, or the limbic brain. And by having the consciousness flow into the limbic brain and losing, happily and consciously losing the sense of time and space and ego, you enter into the field where you can create from pure consciousness. And so this is what we're doing in Yoga Nidra. It's such a beautiful sort of flow chart as you look at the brain system and how we travel from the externally focused world of senses through the brainscape and eventually become conscious in the unconscious mind. And that is really where the magic happens. That's all for this video. So let's sit straight up and take a nice deep breath in. We'll close with the sound of Om. Namaste.